Hey guys, this is JJ Peters. Thanks so much for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. We can't thank you enough. And again, if you're listening on the audio platforms such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, basically wherever you get your podcast, don't forget to rate the podcast if you have not. It would be greatly appreciated. On today's Sports Town Podcast, or STP Pod, we just have one interview, and that interview is with the Blue Bloods podcast to talk about the college football season, or the upcoming college football season, as it's right around the corner. It was a great conversation. Again, don't forget to check that out. Again, all the links will be in the description down below. We talked about who the best team, or who can really compete with Alabama. Is there a surprising team in more of the conference? We talked about the whole ACC, Big Ten, and the Pac-12 possibly merging. We also talked about what's going to happen with the Big 12 now that Texas and Oklahoma is out the door. We talked about some other things. You know, honestly, I forgot to mention who would be the Heisman favorite, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be, a lot of you college football fans probably think it's going to either be Spencer Rattler or Sam Howell as the favorites. I guess Brock Purdy of Iowa State could be a favorite as well. But usually it seems like it's a dark horse. I mean, I guess, well, we didn't really think Devontae Smith would win it last year. And I think 2 years ago, Joe Burrow won it. We didn't expect him to win it. So again, it could happen, but unfortunately we didn't get to talk about that. But again, we had a great talk. We also talked about the whole Scott Frost in Nebraska situation. But again, it was a great conversation. Don't forget to check that out. You'll love it. And again, unfortunately, we only could get one logo for this or one interview for this episode, but hopefully in episode 61, we'll get 2 episodes, or we'll get 2 interviews for the episode. And as always, we have the Sports Lightning Round, questions from Instagram, highlight of the week, our weekly poll question, and much, much more. Again, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Sportstown_podcast, also on Facebook as well, and then on Twitter at Sportstown Podcast, or Sportstown Pod. All right, I think that's pretty much all we need. Let's get the episode started. Before we start today's episode, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsor of today's video, and that sponsor is our good friends over at HelpYouFind.me. You're probably asking yourself, JJ, what is HelpYouFind.me? Well, I'll tell you what it is. Peter Sanchez, the founder, creator, and owner, was originally worried about his daughter and his mom always asking him for his travel details. HelpYouFind.me was initially created for collective peace of mind. 48 hours. These are the most critical moments to find you in the event of an emergency, or worse, waiting for the legal process to access your important history information, which can take up to weeks upon weeks upon weeks. With HelpYouFind.me, you have your own secure and encrypted digital If I Go Missing file that can give you your most trusted people access to virtual information much sooner than the authorities. Each person you share with that has its own access rules, and everything is completely encrypted. Not even HelpYouFind.me can access it. This puts you in total control of your data. You can also update your location, submit photos, screenshots, and post random information or notes on the go. It's as easy as texting with a friend. To find out more information, go to HelpYouFind.me. Also, don't forget to use the promo code down below in my description. If you use the promo code STP2021 to get 15% off your first order. Again, that promo code is STP2021 to get 15% off your first order. And go to, if you want more information, go to HelpYouFind.me. And again, I'll put the link down in the description down below. All right, let's get back to the show. Alrighty, it is time for our weekly poll question. You can vote every week on Instagram and Facebook at Sportstown_podcast, or on Twitter at SportstownPod. Now, the typical, we normally have 2 questions, and this week, once again, we do have 2. So the first question is, will the Yankees make the playoffs this season, especially with how good they've been the last month? 83% or overwhelmingly, you guys said yes, the Yankees will make the playoffs, which I do believe you were right. And right now, I think the Red Sox are the first team out, which is crazy how that's gone from the Red Sox being the best team in baseball, or the best team in the American League, to not even maybe making the playoffs. I know they just got swept by the Yankees, so that's getting a little hot right now. But again, I I think at the end of the day, the Yankees will end making the playoffs. I don't know about the Red Sox, but I do think the Yankees will make the playoffs. And then the other question is with the NHL putting advertisements on their jerseys now, and the NBA already doing the WNBA, the MLS, they've already done it, and pretty much every soccer league puts some type of advertisement. Will the NBA and the NFL follow suit? 88% of you guys said yes. So again, overwhelmingly, I agree with you. I do think eventually, again, the NFL already does it. They put advertisements on the training camp and the practice jerseys. So why not just put it on the on their main jerseys or their main uniforms? What the NHL said, they got $100 million from putting a small advertisement on team helmets. So like if the NFL did something like that, they would make a lot of money. So again, the NFL and the MLB, anything that makes them money, they're going to do. So I believe that's eventually going to happen. I'm with you guys as well. So again, thanks for voting. You can vote every week on Instagram and Facebook at sports_podcast or on Twitter at SportsDownPod.
This is the highlight of the week.
The tailback from the 41. Gabriel to throw. This is intercepted. A game that had no turnovers is right with them. And this is going the other way. Close. An outrageous turn of events. Jalen Alderman.
They're going to get a sideline penalty because they were warned. They, being Louisville, were warned earlier, but right now I don't think anybody, Kark, on that sideline cares about flags.
Alrighty, what a game that was between UCF and Louisville. Louisville gets the upset. Technically, UCF wasn't ranked, but they were the first team officially out of the rankings. I think technically they were ranked 26th. So that was a big win for Louisville. Of course, they went at 42-35 right down the wire. Jalen Alderman, what an interception. Takes it all the way to the house. It didn't matter if there was a flag right after because of excessive celebration on the Louisville side. They still get the win. Of course, I'm a Louisville fan, so I was super pumped about this, and I was really grateful that this was the highlight of the week. But it was an awesome play by Alderman. Louisville, well, we might actually make a bowl game this year after looking not great the first week against Ole Miss. But again, it's going to come down to Mikael Cunningham. And yes, I said Mikael Cunningham. It's actually, his first name is Mikael, not Malik, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know that. But anyways, I do think Louisville could make a bowl game this year, get a big win over UCF. Disappointing, though, for the UCF quarterback. He's officially out for the season, I believe, at the time of this recording. But again, what a play. Jalen Alderman makes this week's highlight of the week, and Louisville gets the upset over UCF 42-35. Jason Benetti, I believe I said his name right, and Andre Ware were on the call on Louisville's upset over UCF. Again, that game was on ESPN for Friday Night Lights.
The STP Sports Lightning Round. Your biggest sports stories in the world this past week.
The Indianapolis Colts are trying something new. The Colts were the first ever team to appear on Hard Knocks during the middle of the season. On Thursday night, it was released the two-time Super Bowl champions will be in Hard Knocks during the middle of the season. It will begin airing on November 17th, and a new episode will be released every Wednesday. After the news was official, NFL Films senior executive said in a statement, "We could not be more thrilled to bring Hard Knocks and the remarkable behind-the-scenes access it provides for the entirety of the NFL season. Thanks to HBO, along with the incredible cooperation from the Colts, we were able to deliver a groundbreaking new edition of the series. This is not the first time that a documentary series has followed an NFL team throughout the series. For about 4 years, the NFL allowed Amazon Prime to do a series called All or Nothing. The episodes were released every week. However, the episodes were released after the season was over, and it was in the middle of the summer when they officially aired. Of course, this is a huge season for the Colts, as they brought in former Eagles quarterback Carson Wentz. Indianapolis also has players such as Quentin Nelson, Darius Leonard, and T.Y. Hilton. The episodes will be on HBO and HBO Max. The Hard Knocks hopes that the Colts have a great season so that people are intrigued and will watch the series. According to multiple reports, Hard Knocks has seen a massive decline in ratings despite the Dallas Cowboys being featured this year. We will see if this experiment works, and if it doesn't work, they will most likely go back to doing just training camp. After losing to Stanford on Saturday, USC did what many college football fans were expecting. The USC Trojans fired head coach Clay Helton and will immediately look for his replacement. Helton took over as an interim coach twice in 2013 and 2015. He coached USC in the 2013 Las Vegas Bowl and took over for the Trojans in 2015 when Steve Sarkisian was suspended for alcohol misbehavior. In 2016, he helped USC win the Rose Bowl by beating Penn State. He also won the Pac-12 1 and was in the championship game 3 times. However, after 2017, he was 19-14 and they failed to win another Pac-12 title. Overall, he went 46-24 in his tenure at USC. In 2018, former athletic director Lynn Swann signed Helton to an extension that runs through 2023. USC defensive back coach Dante Williams will serve as the interim coach. This is what USC's athletic director Mike Bond had to say about Clay Helton. Clay is one of the finest human beings I've ever met in this industry, and he has been a tremendous role model and mentor to our young men. We appreciate his many years of service to our university and wish him nothing but the very best. At the moment, many coaches have been named as possible replacements for Helton. Coaches such as Urban Meyer, Luke Fickell, Chris Peterson, Matt Campbell, and others. One thing is for sure though, this is one of the most coveted jobs in college football right now. The USA men's basketball team will have a new coach. San Antonio Spurs head coach Greg Popovich completed his 5 years coaching the team and helped them win a 4th straight gold medal with a win over France in Japan for the 2021 Olympics. The USA men's teams lost to France in the opening games of the Olympics, but got the revenge in the gold medal game with an 82-77 victory. Grant Hill is the new managing director for Team USA basketball and is replacing 72-year-old Jerry Colangelo. According to the Undefeated, Hill wants to hire a new coach before the new season begins. The upcoming NBA season begins on October 19th. Steve Kerr of the Warriors could be a favorite to be the next head coach, although Nate McMillan is the current head coach of the Atlanta Hawks, and Grant Hill happens to own a percentage of the team. Other candidates that could replace Pop would be Doc Rivers, Tom Thibodeau, Monty Williams, Jason Kidd, Eric Spoelstra, and others. Pop did win a gold medal, however. Some players were not pleased with his coaching style. USA also finished 7th in the 2019 FIBA World Cup, which was the worst finish for the red, white, and blue in basketball. USA will once again be heavily favored in the next Olympics, which will be played in France. We will keep you updated on who Grant Hill chooses as his next head coach for Team USA in basketball. The LA Clippers finally have their own home, or they will. On Friday, it was revealed that the Clippers were approved to start building their own arena in Inglewood, California. It was also revealed that the arena will be called the Intuit Dome. The new arena will be able to fit 18,000 fans, double the amount of toilets than any other arena in the NBA, a lot of leg room for fans, and no waiting in lines for the concession stand. Fans will order their food from their seats so that they never have to miss any action in the game. According to multiple reports, Steve Ballmer will pay approximately $2 billion for the new arena. The Clippers' lease at Staples Center ends at the end of the 2023 season. The following year, the Clippers will be able to have their own home for the first time since they were in San Diego in 1984. This is what Steve Ballmer had to say about the new arena. We needed to say, we're our own guys. We don't play in the same place as the other guys. We're going to have our own identity. We use our expression, LA our way, and we're building our own presence and identity. The Clippers owner, Steve Ballmer, was talking to Ramona Shelburne of ESPN. Last season, the Clippers made their first ever Western Conference Finals appearance, but lost to the Suns in 6 games. Despite all their success, they lost superstar Kawhi Leonard to an injury versus the Jazz in the semifinals. The 2-time Finals MVP, Kawhi Leonard, will most likely not be available for all of next season. There is a chance that Leonard will play in the postseason, but that is still being worked out at the moment. There is a good chance that the Clippers could have their own championship hanging in the rafters of their new arena in 2024. LSU has signed a deal with Caesars Sportsbook. According to multiple reports, it is a multi-year sponsorship agreement. The Associated Press reported on Friday that the deal is worth millions of dollars. The naming rights of the Superdome was previously through Mercedes-Benz, but the contract ended last year. Caesars also stated they will not put a sportsbook in Tiger Stadium or other venues that are owned by LSU. The state of Louisiana is set to allow gambling license very soon and already has a plethora of riverboat casinos in the area. The deal between Caesars Sportsbook and LSU also allows the gambling company to get full rights to the Skyline Club at the football stadium, the Pete Maravich Assembly Center, the Alex Box Stadium, and will be on the LSU Sports mobile app. This is what co-president of Caesars Digital, Chris Holdren, had to say about the new deal with LSU. LSU athletics programs have always exemplified excellence, and at Caesars, we couldn't be happier to partner with such an iconic brand in college athletics. We had a very proud legacy in Louisiana. Scott Woodward, LSU AD, chimed in as well and stated, "We share a clear vision of how athletics and experiment can come together to enhance the fans' experience. We are excited to join with Caesars to make that vision a reality. Both parties are hoping that this deal lasts a long time and is a great investment for years to come." The MLB will require all non-playing staff members to be fully vaccinated before the postseason starts on October 4th to have access to the field and other areas regarding the stadium. This news was first reported by Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic. However, players will not be required to be fully vaccinated. Non-playing staff members do not need to be fully vaccinated, however, if they receive the first dose of the vaccine before October 4th and have the second dose scheduled sometime in the near future. Staff members that refuse to get vaccinated will need to work virtually throughout the postseason. Teams such as the Houston Astros and Washington Nationals require all staff members to be vaccinated. The Baltimore Orioles recently made a rule that every employee must be fully vaccinated before the end of October. The MLB Network also requires every employee to be vaccinated. If they do not receive a vaccine, they will have to work virtually. MLB Network analyst and Hall of Fame pitcher John Smoltz has not been vaccinated and has to work remotely throughout the postseason. The NL and AL wildcard game begin on October 5th and 6th. There's only 2.5 weeks of the 2021 MLB season left, and things are getting more entertaining by the minute. At the time of this recording, the Giants and Brewers have the best record in Major League Baseball. In the NL wildcard standings, the Dodgers and Cardinals sit on top, while in the AL, the Red Sox and Yankees are at the top spot for the AL wildcard. And finally, the natural-born killer Carlos Condit has retired from the sport MMA. Condit's MMA professional record was 32-14. MMA fighting was the first to report the news. He was a former interim welterweight champion. He got it with a win over Nick Diaz. However, he was unable to capture the full welterweight belt as he lost to George St. Pierre at UFC 154. The 37-year-old was in the WEC before joining the UFC. In 2008, he left the WEC to join the UFC. He had wins over fighters such as Jake Ellenberger, Rory McDonald, Dan Hardy, and others. According to MMA Junkie, he went 4-9 in his last 13 professional fights. His last fight was a loss versus Max Griffin. In his impressive MMA career, he also had a tough loss to Robbie Lawyer at UFC 195. He had back-to-back wins in the early 2020s, but he is unable to compete where he once was at. The natural-born killer is one of the greatest welterweight fighters in his generation, and many fans will miss him. Condit is 37 years old and started fighting way back in 2002 when he was just 17 years old. Alrighty, I am pleased to be joined by Zach McKinnell, the host of the Blue Bloods podcast. How's it going, Zach?
Not bad, man. Just definitely appreciate you having me, man. Always down to talk college football, and no better time given that the season starts next week.
And thankfully this year we can have fans for the most part, or most teams can have fans. So before we start talking about college football and stuff like that, if you want to mention more about your podcast and all that so that people know more about, how you do it and stuff like that.
Absolutely, man. The Blue Bloods CFB podcast, the Blue Bloods podcast, whatever you want to call us, man. You can find us on YouTube, any and all podcast streaming platforms, and we just strive to be your one-stop shop for all things college football. We're probably the only show in the country that does FCS, HBCU, Power 5, Group of 5. Like, if you've got a favorite team, no matter who it is, we've probably talked about it, had a player from that team, everything. We do player interviews throughout the off season. We bring in experts from teams in the off season, and we drop daily content on YouTube, and sometimes even 2-3 videos a day. So if you're a college football fan, man, make sure to find us wherever you listen to podcasts and or YouTube, and we'll be your one-stop shop for college football.
All right. Sounds great. Again, all that will be in the link down below. And of course your pod and all that. So, college football season is really close, but there's the big news right now, just in football in general, is Tim Tebow just got cut. I know people consider one of the greatest college quarterback or college football players of all time, but Tim Tebow is officially most likely done in the NFL. Do you think, or first of all, what did you think of that? What did you think that Tim Tebow was cut? What did you think of that exactly?
I mean, for me, being a college football guy, the Tim Tebow that we covered, grew up watching at Florida was not the Tim Tebow that you saw on the field down there in Jacksonville. What it was, pretty much, in my opinion, was Urban Meyer felt like he owed him at least a shot, owed him at least a practice squad shot, and he got that. And for me, I never thought he was going to make the roster. I never thought he was going to start for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, to pick up a whole new position that you've never played in your mid 30s and expect to be a top 30 player at that position, which is what it will require to be a starter in the NFL, is not realistic. And then when all the videos came out of him during the preseason game, whiffing on blocks, getting thrown around by guys who probably aren't even going to make the roster, his fate was kind of sealed. And I feel like the reason the cut happened when it did is because every single news outlet, sports outlet, was talking about that clip. And if Urban Meyer gave him a spot, he would lose all credibility in the locker room. So I feel like what it did is it achieved both their goals. Tim Tebow got one more shot at the NFL. Urban helped out a friend. And at the end of the day, man, no harm, no foul. It happened, and now he gets to go be happy on SEC Network. But I don't think anybody realistically expected him to make the roster, especially as a tight end.
Yeah, I totally agree with you because if Tim Tebow maybe would have tried tight end about 10 years ago or back in 2013 when he was in New England, he probably would have got a shot. And but it's different now, and it didn't seem like it was ever going to fit. And I was kind of surprised that he tried again. It seemed like he had some success in baseball. I know he had some injuries, and I know he kind of was stuck in AAA, it seemed like. But I thought he should have just stayed with baseball a few more years. He maybe had a chance to actually play for the Mets, like the MLB, or like they're actually the team. But unfortunately, that didn't work out for him, and he wanted to try football. Most likely, he's going to go back to broadcasting the SEC network. But it's a little disappointing. But I think at the same time, Urban Meyer really had no choice. He gave him the shot, and basically it was kind of a win-win for all parties and stuff like that. So do you think, or actually before we go back, or before we start with the college football season, do you think Tim Tebow will go back to broadcasting?
He should. I mean, he had a great gig on SEC Nation, which is like the college game day of the SEC network. You get to travel around to all the top SEC games. You've got a lot of SEC cred, a lot of SEC fans. So for me, if you want a long-term career in sports, that's your option because you're not going to make the MLB now. You're not going to make the NFL. I mean, so I feel like your playing sports career is done. He doesn't need the money, but why not go talk about and broadcast the sport you love for ESPN? So I would imagine you're probably going to see him on SEC Nation starting up in 2 weeks, wherever they pick week 1 to go for the SEC.
Yeah, and I think he was doing it pretty good. I don't remember exactly. I think it's been a while. Well, I guess it's been I don't know, 2019 the last time he was doing it, or was he doing it last year? I can't remember. Yeah. But
I think he was balancing both last year because I believe it was Paul Feinbaum, Laura Rutledge, I'm blanking, Tim Tebow, and then I'm blanking on the guy from ESPN who did it with them, Marcus Spears from LSU. They were the four, and that they all did a great job, and it's a great dynamic, and I thought it was a great show. So for me, his best career path will be doing that, but he's going to be successful in whatever he's doing. He doesn't need the money. He's not struggling. So I'm sure he's just going to make whatever decision is best for him.
Yeah, I feel like, that would be ESPN would definitely welcome him with open arms because they could definitely make a lot of money. And I remember back in the day, they used to always talk about him. So I think they'll definitely be excited to have him return. So now let's go on to the college football landscape. The big news this week, of course, in college football was the ACC, Big Ten, and Pac-12 have thought about possibly merging or having some type of alliance. Do you think that will happen? And and if it does happen, when do you think when do you think they should merge? Like, what exact year would make the most sense?
So I mean, the thing with the merger is, one, I think it is going to happen. I think today they announced that it's almost official as it can be. And two, there really doesn't have to be a start date, because what the merger is not, they're not merging the conferences in terms of they're all going to be one conference. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting caught up, is Clemson's not going to be part of the, whatever it would be, like the Pac-40 teams or whatever it may end up being. What the alliance really is a scheduling alliance and a voting alliance. So what that means is Pac-12 teams will be able to freely schedule ACC teams, vice versa, and then also throw in the Big Ten scheduling. So what it's going to do is they're almost combining their forces to raise the strength of schedule, raise the perception of the conferences. That way, those conferences can be more competitive for the college football playoff, which has been a problem in the past, especially for the Pac-12 and especially for the ACC outside of Clemson, because once you get past Clemson, the average college football fan doesn't respect that conference as a entity. So what it is a scheduling alliance to allow them to play each other out in non-conference games. That way they can increase their strength of schedule. And the voting alliance is important because, according to all reports, a lot of people viewed, and a lot of people high up in the ACC, Big Ten, and also the ACC viewed the SEC and what they did with Texas and Oklahoma and acquiring them for their conference. They viewed it as aggressive, and they viewed it as the SEC trying to monopolize college football, especially when afterwards you had a lot of reports about the SEC trying to grab Clemson and Florida State as well. So what the ACC, Big Ten, and Pac-12 don't want is the SEC to become the new NCAA, because if they get all the best teams, then what's the point of having a playoff, and what's the point of having college football as we know it? So what the commissioners did are come together to almost, this alliance should be called the anti-SEC alliance, because the reason they're an alliance is because they're trying to outvote the SEC on big issues. They're trying to stick together against the SEC because they feel like it's being too powerful and that the SEC is trying to monopolize college football.
Okay. Yeah, because when Texas and Oklahoma made the announcement that they were going to the SEC, it was like everybody started panicking. And it seems like the Big 12 is kind of left for dead here because they weren't part of the ACC and Big 10. And as a Louisville fan, and I live in Iowa, which is crazy to be that type of fan, but I can actually see us maybe playing Iowa once a year or whatever, however they do it. And I can actually not have to go to Louisville to watch the game, which would be awesome. But again, it's very interesting to see what happens. And that would be fun to watch Clemson and Ohio State every year or however they do it. And in basketball, you got teams, like I said, in the ACC with North Carolina and Duke. And, of course, the Big Ten, you got in the ACC, you also have Louisville. And then, of course, in football, you have Clemson, Ohio State, and Michigan. And it's going to be fun. Or do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, and so, I've been vocal on our podcast about the non-conference problem in college football and the uniformity in conference scheduling. What I would like to see with this alliance, one positive thing I would like to see at least, is these conferences form some sort of, in basketball, you see the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Mm-hmm. Joel Klatt also was, I guess, the first one that I've heard propose this, is where the ACC and Big 10, let's say they make a challenge to open up week 1, 2, and 3. You can spread the games across the first 3 weeks, where the two champions face off in the primetime matchup. Then the second place from each conference face each other. The third place finishers face each other, and so on and so forth. That way you have, one, even matchups, and two, it exhibits the best of the best that you have. And what that will do is allow the conversation to begin to be had about what these real strengths of conferences are, because you saw Alabama play Duke week 1 a few years ago. What does that prove about either one of those teams? I don't think anyone in the country thought Duke was ever going to actually beat Alabama. And the real matchups you want to see are the Auburns versus Washingtons that we saw, which was a classic game. The Auburns versus Oregons that you saw, which was a classic game. You see those huge games. The Georgia Clemson matchup this year is huge. You don't want to see Alabama go play the 9th best ACC team. You don't want to see LSU go play the 10th best Big 12 team. You want to see the best of the best play early in the season, and that's what I hope to really see coming out of this alliance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, with the basketball, the ACC plays the Big Ten. I think it's the SEC versus Big 12. And yeah, if you had something that with football, that would make a lot of sense. And that's actually, I didn't know about that with Joel Klatt, but that's actually a smart decision because then you have Clemson, Ohio State. That'd be a great matchup. And that would be fun to watch. And I'm definitely excited for that. That would be very exciting to watch. And it'd probably be on ESPN or ABC or however they do it. But so now let's go back to the season. It seems like Alabama once again is going to be a favorite. I think Oklahoma, the preseason ranking was ranked, second or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you see the season going? And is there any chance that anybody can actually chase Alabama?
So I guess we haven't made our official national championship picks on our page, but I'll just give y'all my pick anyway. I think this year, man, if there's ever a year that Lincoln Riley is going to win a national championship at Oklahoma, it's going to be this year.
Mm-hmm.
That team, man, is loaded. We did an episode, I think I actually released it this week, where I break down like why Oklahoma should be the preseason favorite. Like if you're ranking just based on this year, Oklahoma has the best roster on paper, in my opinion. They have Spencer Rattler, who is probably the best quarterback in the country. You could argue second if you love Sam Howell. I'm not going to hate you if you argue Sam Howell. But when you look at the opening here, because if you're of college football, you research and know about college football, when's the last time that three of the top four teams were replacing quarterbacks and had first-year starters? You have Bryce Young at Alabama. Now, given he's a five-star, arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the country already, and if he lives up to the hype, no worry for Alabama. Then you have Clemson bringing in DJ, who is a first-time starter. Let's be realistic. 2 games does not make you an incumbent starter. So we're going to see how he can lead Clemson throughout the year. And then you still have a quarterback battle raging, even though the favorite looks to be C.J. Stroud at Ohio State. You have Quinn Ewers. You have Jack Miller. You have C.J. Stroud. You have like a 4-person quarterback battle raging in Ohio State. And then you have Georgia, who's returning JT Daniels. But we just heard this week that they're losing like 3 wide receivers and their top DB to injury for week 1 against Clemson. So what are they going to be with the injury bug? All these contenders have huge question marks, and when you look at Oklahoma, they have the returning quarterback. They're all Big 12 running backs coming back. The offensive line's all coming back. Their wide receiving units all coming back. All the defense is coming back. The only question I have about Oklahoma is their secondary, which I feel like is not a huge question because they have a lot of talent on the back end of that defense. But what you're going to get with Spencer Rattler is Marvin Mims was a breakout player for me last year. Austin Stogner at tight end comes back. He was the highest graded tight end in the country before he went down with injury. Kennedy Brooks is back at running back, and they landed an impact player in Eric Gray from Tennessee, who transferred after all the turmoil that happened under Jeremy Pruitt with the Vols. And on the defensive side of the ball, a name that you're going to have to remember is Nick Bonito. He's an edge rusher out of Oklahoma and had the highest pass rush win rate, had the most pressures, and it might be the number 1 defensive lineman drafted next year out of college. Right there with right out there with Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon. So right now, Oklahoma for me is looking like a really, really strong team. And also, if Georgia can stay healthy, I really like what they have coming back. They were a different team after JT Daniels took over last year, where they won out at the end of the season. JT Daniels threw 10 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in only 4 games, and Kirby Smart has made some questionable QB choices. JT Daniels would be the best quarterback to start a game for Kirby Smart since he's been at Georgia. So I think this year, Oklahoma and Georgia are 2 teams you need to watch out for. And if Bryce Young lives up to the hype, of course, Alabama is going to be in it. But for me, right now, those are my 3 top teams in college football right this second.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize how good Oklahoma was until you kind of did that or explained it, because I haven't really looked at Oklahoma really this year yet. And yeah, with that type of roster, and of course Spencer Rattler is the more popular guy, and of course him and Sam Howell are probably the 2 best quarterbacks in college football. So I could see a case where Oklahoma could be a really good team. Georgia, What about, and the ACC seems similar to the SEC, where it's most probably Alabama's going to be the favorite. And it seems like Clemson's going to be the team favorite. But who probably would be the second best team in the ACC? Would North Carolina be that team, or is it someone else?
Personally, I think it's North Carolina. You can make an argument for Miami, but there's a lot of questions about De'Aaron King's injury history and consistency. He's been banged up. He tore his ACL in the bowl game last year. And the whole storyline, like the career arc of De'Aaron King plays out of his mind against lesser to like mid-level mediocre talent. And then when he plays the best of the best, he just can't seem to live up. And we saw it last year against Clemson, where Miami was running through the ACC, and then they averaged like 3 yards a pass and like negative yards rushing against Clemson in Death Valley. So you can't have that if you're realistically going to challenge Clemson for the ACC. I like North Carolina because last year they were a really good team and they got hot late in the year. I mean, when you look at that, I think it was a 62-20 domination over Miami, and they ran for 500 yards in Miami Gardens in the last game of the year. That left a real strong impression for me. And then you got Sam Howell at quarterback, man. He's unanimously a top 2 quarterback. Some people have him number 1 and as the Heisman favorite, but the question for me is going to be weapons for UNC, and that's really going to determine if they can challenge Clemson. They lose Javonte Williams and Michael Carter to the NFL draft, both drafted in the top 3 rounds. Then they lose their top 2 wide receivers in De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome to the NFL draft. So what is that running back room and wide receiver room going to look like? And I think there's some good options. But for me, I'm all about what you do on the field. Everything can look good on paper, and if you don't put it together on Saturdays, it really doesn't matter how great you look all written down. We can talk storylines and notes all day, but until Josh Downs, Caffrey, Brown, all those guys step on the field, we really don't know what they're going to bring. But the strength of this UNC team, which is weird for a Mac Brown team, is going to be the defense. Jay Bateman, who's the defensive coordinator, has done an outstanding job building this roster. I think UNC might have the strongest corner pair in the entire country. Tony Grimes and Storm Duck have just unlimited potential. Tony Grimes is a kid. I don't know if you know this or your listeners do. This kid reclassified right before last season, skipped his high school year, came onto the field and earned a starting job by the end of the year at 17 years old.
Unbelievable.
That's the type of potential Tony Grimes has as a 5-star. And he's long, explosive. He's so fast. He got clocked on I believe a punt return his last year in high school, accelerating in full pads in grass in a real game, accelerating to 20 miles per hour in under 4 seconds. That's the type of acceleration and speed Tony Grimes brings you. Storm Duck's a 2-year starter. This is really going to be his breakout year. So I really like what UNC is returning. And if there's any team in the ACC that for me can compete with Clemson, is going to be UNC this year.
Yeah, it's like I say, especially when you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league or in the country with Sam Howell. But yeah, I was kind of thinking, as the ACC the last 5-6 years has been dominated by Clemson. Before that, it was dominated by Florida State. But it seems like there really hasn't been that. It's number 2 is always really distant. So it would be interesting to see if North Carolina can actually compete with Clemson, but we'll see. I mean, it's definitely going to be a competitive and fun season, I think. On the Big Ten side of things, again, Ohio State is probably going to be the favorite. But who would you say, or really, do you think Ohio State should be the favorite in the Big Ten?
Yeah, by like leaps and bounds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you look at the other teams, there's a handful of teams I think can compete. But when you look at the roster that Ohio State and Ryan Day has put together, you just can't touch it. I mean, when you look at the wide receiving unit, where Ohio State realistically, so everyone likes to talk about depth and how deep this team is, they probably have a wide receiving room where 7 guys can start at any other school in the country right now. When Marvin Harrison's son, who was one of the highest rated wide receivers coming out of the country, might be your lowest wide receiver on the depth chart, that shows you the type of depth that you have at Ohio State. And then Chris Olave is probably the best receiver in the country. He's going to be like that new Jamar Chase that's going to go in the top 5. He led the country in separation on targets last year, deep down the field. Whoever's the quarterback is going to have an easy job. This O-line, man, you're going to turn on an Ohio State game this year, and it's going to be watching like a quarterback playing behind like pine trees, man. It's just going to be a bunch of huge guys where you're like, man, where did they find these kids? The one question I have about Ohio State is their secondary, though. Their secondary is going to be young. Their secondary is going to be unproven. And the secondary really cost them last year against Alabama in the national championship. So for me, I think the defensive line is going to have to carry them. Zach Harrison, Tyreek Smith are going to have to be huge edge rushers. Haskell Garrett on the inside of that nose defensive tackle spot is going to be big. And then they have 5-star Jack Sawyer, who had like 3 sacks in the spring game, who looks every bit the part, was a top 5 player in this past class. So they have the defensive linemen. Can the defensive line do enough early to let that secondary gel is really my question. And when you're looking at who could come out of the other division, I'll look at a team like Wisconsin. But the problem is, there's so many questions. Like, you don't know what the quarterback play is going to be. Graham Mertz is so talented, man. But he played electric against Michigan and Illinois. I mean, he had 1 incompletion against Illinois, lit it up against Michigan. But then he goes out against Northwestern and throws for like 90 yards. And it cost them the game, and it cost them a chance. And Northwestern has been a crux for Wisconsin in the recent years. And that's why Northwestern has represented that division 2 out of the 3 last years in the Big Ten, shocking everybody. The questions I have are the run game for them, which is weird coming from a Wisconsin program. You look at the history of running backs. They have Jalen Berger, who was supposed to be the next man up last year, but they really didn't utilize him appropriately. But I think this year he could be a breakout player. The O-line is always going to be outstanding, man. And then the other thing is depth at the wide receiver spot. They really don't have any wide receiving targets that stick out for me. Ever since they lost Quintez Cephas to the NFL draft, they've kind of been looking for that next wide receiver to step up. I mean, Jake Ferguson at tight end is one of the best tight ends in the country. I get that, but you're going to have a wide receiver that can get deep, that can make plays down the field. Danny Davis III is a promising young prospect on Wisconsin. But outside of him, there's nobody I point to and say, man, we're in 3rd down and 10. I can throw it to that guy and he can make a play, which could be a problem when you're going up against Ohio State and they have 10 of those guys that you can trust to go make a play on 3rd and 10. So that's what separates Ohio State from the rest of the Big Ten is really the depth of talent they have on that team. And so for me right now, it's Ohio State's conference to lose. But Wisconsin is going to be tough. I think Minnesota also could be tough coming out of the other side. And then we saw Indiana give Ohio State a real strong run. Michael Penix is back. Ty Freifogel is back. Both, Penix went for 500 yards. Freifogel went for 303 touchdowns. So their 2 Achilles heels last year are back for Indiana in that division. That's going to be a huge game to watch. But Ohio State absolutely should be the favorite.
Yeah, that's not surprising because, again, it's similar. It's a little better than the ACC, but yeah, it's pretty much Ohio State's conference to lose, similar to the ACC with Clemson. Yeah. So we've talked about the SEC, we've talked about the ACC, we've talked about the Big Ten, and pretty much we already talked about the Big 12 with Oklahoma being the big favorite. But what about the Pac-12? Because that seems like it's always wide open. It's probably going to again be wide open this year. But who are really the 2 or 3 teams that could win the conference?
Oh, man, you say it, everyone keeps saying it's wide open, but for me, I feel like there's been the team that dominates. I mean, Oregon is looking to win their 3rd straight Pac-12 title, and they have just been leaps and bounds better than everybody else. And last year, they won it kind of by default, to be honest. Washington qualified for the Pac-12 title, got kicked out because of COVID. Their arch rival gets to go in Oregon, and they upset USC for the Pac-12 title. So just imagine how Washington feels right now. But you remember, Oregon won it last year, man, with Penei Sewell, a top 10 draft pick, opting out, with Javon Holland opting out, who was a top, I believe, 35 pick. They had like 6 players opt out who are going to be future NFL draft picks. So Oregon was struck really hard by COVID and still found a way to pull it out. Mario Cristobal for me, so I get it. I'm from Alabama. I live in Kansas now. Southern fans who, make up a lot of college football and a lot of strong voices of college football just ignore the Pac-12, which really aggravates me on our show. And that's why we cover a lot of Pac-12, because they just forget that it's out there. It comes on at, 11 o'clock on the East Coast. No one stays up to watch it. I understand. But Oregon's a real contender this year, in my opinion, for the college football playoff with how that roster's built. Mario Cristobal has done an excellent job. And in case you guys don't know who that is, he comes from the Nick Saban coaching tree and was the offensive line coach when Alabama was running through the early 2010s. So he knows how to build an SEC team, and that's what he's done. He started up by building the offensive line and moving outwards, and that defense is legit. I mean, right now, they have the number one defensive line in the Pac-12, the number 2 secondary, and the number 1 linebacking core. And when you look at Kayvon Thibodeau, who, outside of Derek Stingley at Clemson, might be the best defensive player in the entire country. On top of that, you have 2 5-star linebackers who were top 10 players in their class manning the 2 linebacker spots. And then on the back end of the defense, Bennett Williams is a promising young talent. Michael Wright steps in at the DB1 spot. Jamal Hill steps in on the other side. And Verone McKinley III is the next great safety, in my opinion, to come out of Oregon. So personally, I honestly love what Oregon has on the defensive side of the ball. The only question I have about Oregon this year, man, is Anthony Brown at quarterback. I have a lot of questions. We did a whole show in terms of fall camp rumors this week where we're going through talking about the latest quarterback battles, things like that. Anthony Brown's a transfer from Boston College. He has over 20 games of experience, but when he was at Boston College, he wasn't great. I mean, his true passing grade, I think, was like a 65, according to Pro Football Focus. He struggled with turnovers a lot. And he in this most recent practice, he was 1 for 6 in the third down, segment of the practice, and had trouble with his accuracy. And why this matters to me is because they have a 5-star behind him. The kid's name is Todd Thompson. He's the highest rated Oregon quarterback commit, since Marcus Mariota, and he's a higher rated player than Mariota was. He threw for almost 11,000 yards in his high school at Arizona, over 100 touchdowns. The kid's legit. He's already like 6'5", 220. He looks every bit the part to be the next great quarterback, but they're not giving him a chance at the starting position. And I'm very worried that Anthony Brown's going to limit the potential of this Oregon team, because if you take a blind resume and blank out the quarterback, that roster is a national championship roster, in my opinion. But Anthony Brown is not a national championship quarterback, and that's where I worry about Oregon. And then, of course, USC is going to challenge. Keaton Slovis is the real deal, but they lost a lot in the transfer portal. The D-line's there, but what's that secondary going to be like? And then I would watch out for Washington, too. That was a team that slid into the back end of that AP Top 25 we saw released last week. They were at 20. They have a 5-star quarterback waiting in the wings as well. And so I'm very concerned about how that's going to work out. Jimmy Lake taking over for Chris Peterson is very, very difficult. Always replacing a legend is hard. Washington's defense is going to be one of the elites of the country, but it's a question mark about how far can that offense take them. So there's a lot of question marks around Pac-12 contenders, but like you said, I think it's Washington, USC, Oregon are the realistic contenders for that conference.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I didn't really know all that about Oregon, but that is interesting to know. And yeah, Oregon, of course, won last year because of, the whole thing with Washington. And then, of course, USC. I wasn't super impressed with USC last year. And, of course, there was only, 7 games? Or I think it was 7 games, right? It was a really short season for the Pac-12.
I think it was 6, actually. I think they were 5-1 after. And going into the Pac-12 title game, I think they played 5 games. The Pac-12 commissioner, Larry Scott, he's fired. He resigned now. He never should have been able to keep his job, man. He butchered last season for the Pac-12 and really cost a lot of great athletes a chance at a national title.
Yeah. And just the whole West, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I think the Pac-12 is always forgotten, at least in the football terms. But it just is, at one time in the mid-2000s, the Pac-12 was the conference, or was one of the conferences that people talked about. But, we'll see what happens within the next few years. I know they have a new commissioner, and maybe with the merger with the ACC and Big Ten, it's going to help a lot more. And one quick thing that I saw from yesterday, I think it was reported on Wednesday, but the whole Scott Frost situation in Nebraska, it seems like they're kind of in trouble here. And of course, if Nebraska doesn't make a bowl game this year, Scott Frost could be out. But what do you think about the whole Nebraska situation?
I mean, it looks really bad. And, I don't want to, piss off the entire Cornhusker Nation here, but I mean, it's a really bad look that you were cheating and still losing. I mean, because there's reports, they were using assistants inappropriately. They had too many because a lot of these COVID restrictions limited the staffs and things like that. So for me, it's a real bad look. One, it's a lack of, team control for Scott Frost on top of not winning, on top of now Scott Frost might be suspended for like 4 to 6 games, I've heard, or, they're going to hand him a suspension for what I hear. And then also, too, you might get a bowl ban, which, you haven't really made bowl games recently. So I guess that is a big deal, to some fans. But for me, Scott Frost is finding himself on the hottest seat in the country. And right now, I feel like the patience is running very thin with the fans, which means it's also probably running very thin with the upper management. And so Scott Frost right now is probably regretting every single day his decision to leave UCF from where they were.
Yeah. It made sense at first because Scott Frost, everybody loved him there. And of course, he goes to Nebraska, a lot bigger, more money and stuff like that, a bigger school, or at least a bigger, football school or whatever, even though UCF is becoming really good at football. But that was kind of the place. And then he just hasn't done enough, or hasn't done anything. And now he's got a $20 million buyout. So if Nebraska can figure out a way to fire him with cause, I think they want to pay him that $20 million, but that's still a lot if you want to get rid of him in the whole situation. So again, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or?
Oh yeah. Just one more thing. I mean, so he's kind of in the same spot with me as Harbaugh.
Oh yeah.
The biggest black mark on his resume is that he came in as an offensive guy who was able to recruit quarterbacks and has yet to recruit a good quarterback in Nebraska.
Yeah.
How are you landing the Blake Bortles, the Mackenzie Miltons, the quality of quarterbacks that we've seen come out of UCF in the recent years? How are you getting them at UCF, but the best you could do at Nebraska is Adrian Martinez?
Yeah.
And then you get Luke McCaffrey, who now is playing at Northern Iowa, I believe is who landed Luke McCaffrey. So what in the world are you doing on the recruiting trail? And it's the same thing for Harbaugh up at Michigan, where you come in, you're like, I did this with Kaepernick, I did this with Alex Smith, I did this with Andrew Luck, and now the best you're giving me is Cade McNamara. I can't accept it when you're getting paid the amount of money that those two guys are. So I think Scott Frost, the biggest, I guess, criticism I have is how in the world can you not recruit a quarterback to Nebraska, who honestly is a blue blood of college football based on like what they were doing in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of fans still think that at times. It's kind of like Nebraska fans, I feel like, are kind of like Cowboy fans in the 90s, where they think they're all this and really they're not. And it's somewhat similar to Michigan fans, but I mean, at least they have their basketball to cheer for. So anyways, and now as we end the interview, again, thanks for coming on. Do you have anything in store for the future for your podcast?
Oh man, just check us out, man. We we got some awesome players lined up for after the season and during the season, man. We got some cool stuff coming down the pipeline, man. We're doing all kind of game content and live shows afterwards and a live game preview, and we're hosting like talk rooms on a halftime app on Sundays, so you can just join and vent about your team. And so and if you just want to get exposed to more football, because I know it's hard to get invested when you don't know the players, the teams, just tune into our show, man. we cover, like I said, we cover every level of college football. So if you're looking for a team to get invested, man, we have player interviews, we have team breakdowns, so you can, learn about a new team, man, have more football to watch. Like I say, there's never too much football, man. So make sure to check us out if you just want some more college football content.
Okay, thanks again. And again, that is the Blue Bloods podcast hosted by Zach McKinnell. Again, all the information will be down in the description below. All right, thanks again for coming on, Zach, and have a wonderful night. Alrighty, let's finish up the show with our weekly segment or our questions from Instagram, where I answer 3 fan sports questions. Again, if you want to be part of questions from Instagram, don't forget to follow us at Instagram at sports_podcast. And all you have to do is just whenever the questions from Instagram comes out in the STP pod story, fill out any type of sports question, and I will give you a shout out on the most recent episode. All right, the first question comes from at BlakeBill17. He asked, now that we're talking about college football, what team do you expect to win the championship and why? Well, I mean, let's be honest, Alabama's going to be the heavy favorite, but when I was talking to the Blue Bloods podcast recently, of course, you guys just heard of it if you're watching or if you're listening right now, it seemed like he liked Oklahoma, which I can understand. They're supposed to be really good this year. Of course, I'm a Louisville fan, so I'm hoping that we can, rebound from our disappointing season last year. The ACC seems like it's going to be dominated again by Clemson. North Carolina possibly could be a team that maybe makes some noise. I need to do some more research in college football. I just really think right now it's going to be Alabama versus everybody else. Again, there's Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma. I guess it'd be Oregon would be the favorite in the Pac-12, but really, I think it's going to be Alabama, and just because they're Alabama and almost every year they win. Last year they just dominated Ohio State, even though Ohio State, you could tell, was trying their hardest, but they just could not keep up with Alabama. I bet Alabama could have beat the Jacksonville Jaguars last year is how good they were. So again, thanks for the question at BlakeBill17. This next question comes from Jake_Lewis44, and he asks, with the podcast, with now that you said the merchandise is very close to happening, what type of clothes would you actually sell? Well, not sure yet. And again, it's all up in the air, but right now it might just be shirts and sweatshirts. Probably not hats, unfortunately. It'll probably just be shirts and hoodies. And then if I can find someone else to do hats, I would love to do that. But right now it's probably just going to be shirts and shirts and sweatshirts, excuse me. But thanks for the question at Jake_Lewis44. Excuse me, that's my bad. And the last question, last but not least, comes from at fan of the Steelers, and he asked, why do you not like the Steelers, and why do you think Ben Roethlisberger is done, or this could be his last year? Well, to be honest with you, I don't dislike the Steelers. I just don't think the Steelers are going to be very good this year. I think they're going to take a step back. I could see them going 9-8 or 10-7, but still missing the playoffs because, first of all, the AFC is stacked, and Ben Roethlisberger is not a young quarterback anymore. He's the opposite of young quarterback. In fact, he's getting older. He's getting up there. He's definitely not the quarterback he once was, and I just don't have any confidence. And I think that was the big reason why last year they had such a bad finish. They started 11-0 and they finished 12-4 and got blown out by the Browns in the opening round of the playoffs. So I don't dislike the Steelers, and I don't dislike Ben Roethlisberger. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he's a future Hall of Famer, first ballot, definitely. But he's not the quarterback he once was, and I think he's the one that's hurting the Steelers' chances of actually doing well because that defense is stacked. The offense is a little questionable. They lost a lot of their offensive line. Do they have enough weapons with Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool? Najee Harris, I think, will be great next year. I could see him winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, but I think Ben Roethlisberger is the weak link for the Steelers. But again, I don't hate the Steelers, but I see what you're getting from it. It did kind of sound that way, but it's not meant to be that way. I just don't have any confidence in Ben Roethlisberger. But thanks again for the question at fan of the Steelers. And again, if you guys want to be part of questions from Instagram, just fill out your story on the STP pod. STP pod story on Instagram at sports_podcast. All right, that ends this episode of the Sports Down Podcast.